Can a game be too unique for its own good? When arcade graphics and sound were getting more detailed and cute, Taito's Kicks was a throwback, minimalist, bordering on abstract. No distractions from the gameplay. Claim space on the screen, either fast or slow. Avoid the sparks and the kicks until you claim a certain percentage of the screen. The game was a hit, and there was nothing else out there like it. So what is its legacy? Like for Part 2. It would be 6 years until a full sequel would come to arcades with Super Kicks, developed by Kaneko for Taito. Minimal becomes colorful. There's now power-ups to grab. The Kicks is now a gremlin, and the sparks are now skulls. Why? No idea. The most significant change is that a picture is revealed when you claim space, and the whole picture is shown when a level is finished. How significant is that? Like for Part 3. 2 years later, Taito would bring another sequel along with another name you weren't sure how to pronounce. Volfied actually tries to bring a plot to the now space-themed game, as you're a ship slowly taking back your planet from alien invaders. Again, the picture reveal mechanic is here, which are supposed to be surface shots of Volfeld's cities, but they're more like patterns, something you'd expect to find on an early PC screensaver. This doesn't end here. Like for Part 4. Super Kicks developer Kaneko struck out on their own and released Gal's Panic, which took the Kicks gameplay into the eroge realm. The pictures are silhouettes of digitized and later anime female models. The more of the game space you reveal, the more revealing the picture eventually becomes. The game also made it very easy to continue right from where you left off, as long as you had the quarters, of course. There were at least 7 main arcade games in this series released over 12 years. Like for Part 5. One game that could be considered a distant sister to Kicks is Libble Rabble. Libble and Rabble being the names of 2 arrows you control at the same time to claim space on the board and capture the mushroom-like creatures to harvest them through the seasons. Designed by the creator of Pac-Man himself, Toru Iwatani, controlling the dual arrows at the same time is a big challenge, but the game was a hit in Japan and still maintains a cult status. 2021 saw the first release in US on home consoles. In 1981, inspired by watching a man trying to cross a very busy street, Activision designer David Crane came up with a game. Your goal is to guide your man across the multi-lane road and avoid all oncoming traffic. If you got hit, you became a red splat. The other designers complained that the game might be too violent, so the blood went away, the man was turned into a chicken, thus giving us Freeway. Like for Part 2 and the achievement. Why did the chicken cross the road 20 times on game 3 or 7? To get an old school achievement, of course. This game has obvious ties to the arcade classic Frogger released the same year, but your chicken can't go left or right, only up or down. Touching any car sends your chicken back a lane, costing you the limited time you have. I really had to get into a zone, spotting patterns to find the quickest route, so finally hitting 20 crossings was a great feeling. Patch acquired. If you don't know this man's face, you might recognize his voices. This is Frank Oz, director, actor, and longtime creative partner of Jim Henson. Frank performed as many memorable characters on Sesame Street, The Muppet Show, and beyond. Many of us instantly recognize these voices, but Frank has insisted that he's not a voice person, and he doesn't even think about the voices. So what does he think about? Like for Part 2. Frank Oz has stated that he doesn't think about the voice, but the character. In the 1984 documentary Henson's Place, Frank explains that to perform Miss Piggy, he has to get in touch with his feminine side, get hurt, then cover that hurt up with humor. A pretty complex process. By contrast, Oz says he loves performing Animal because his character is so one-dimensional that it's down to 5 words: sex, sleep, food, drums, and pain. Old school achievement time. This game was designed by Activision's first female programmer, Carol Shaw, and it sold so well that she cites this game, River Raid, as a big reason she was able to retire early. The game was based on the arcade hit Scramble, but set vertically for smoother scrolling on the 2600. Your plane shoots enemy ships, helicopters, planes, fuel tanks, and bridges without touching the sides of the river. How did I do? Like for Part 2. Earning 15,000 points to get this patch sounds straightforward, but a big part of the game involves fuel. You're constantly using it. You have 2 choices with the fuel tanks: shoot them for points or run over them to refuel your plane. That constant eye on the fuel gauge brings a lot of tension to the game, whether it's debating whether you need the fuel or the points, or destroying a tank you actually need by mistake. That's what made reaching this score and getting this patch an intensely fun time. 1982 saw some classic space shooters released for the 2600, like Imagic's bestseller Demon Attack and Activision's Mega Mania, so Activision newcomer Larry Miller had a lot to live up to when he created Spider Fighter that same year. You fight a roving nest that lays spy pods, hatching into various spiders that provide cover while the nest attempts to steal the 3 fruits from your garden. Saving all the fruit each round earns you an extra ship or bonus points, like for Part 2. 40,000 points earns you this game's patch. While you have 3 fruits to guard, I never found it difficult to protect them all. The difficulty comes in the fast pace of these spiders, with some spiders who clearly don't respect personal space. I also was free to mash the fire button, as you can't shoot anything wrong, and in higher levels, the increasing speed of the shots can make this game cathartic. It was frustrating but rewarding when I finally hit 40,000. Patch earned. I haven't been posting very long, barely a month. So I'm happy to have my first follow from an actual game developer, Cygnus Studios. In celebration of this, and with the note that I'm not sponsored by them at all, I'd like to show you their current game, Cygnus Racing League. Based on their iOS game of the same name, this PC game is best described as a futuristic battle racer, taking on an insane amount of racers on multiple worlds and tracks. Would you like to know more? Like for Part 2. Cygnus Racing League is currently available for free on Steam as early access. It reminds me of the old Nintendo 64 game F-Zero X, but with weapons. There's 6 racers to choose from. My favorite is the Tron-inspired Force Point Legion. You can load out your racer with various power-ups, and you gain points by completing laps, damaging and destroying other racers, or both. Usually it's both. Want more? Like for Part 3. In its current early access state, Cygnus Racing League has a good base to build on. The graphics are on the simpler side, but the 9 available tracks are all distinct, there's a good sense of speed, and the graphics run smooth. Cygnus Studios continues to work on the game, releasing future roadmaps for additions and fixes, and addressing feedback from users. Plus, it's free on Steam right now, so you can try it for yourself. In 2021, David Crane posted this image on Twitter, a hex dump of the code to one of his early Activision games and my next old school achievement, Laser Blast. Instead of the ground forces at the bottom fighting alien spacecraft like Space Invaders, you play the alien spacecraft fighting the ground forces. You fight waves of tanks and have the ability to fire in 3 directions, down, diagonal left, and diagonal right. How did I do? Like for Part 2. 100,000 points earns this game's patch. 3 tanks at a time is all you face. No other enemies, only getting slightly faster. And you get extra ships at 1,000 points. After a few false starts, I was able to get into a rhythm taking down each wave, occasionally getting hit and guiding my falling ship down to kamikaze the offending tank. I never really felt in danger of not getting this patch. But there's more, like for Part 3. When Streets of Rage 4 was released in 2020, it broke the beat-em-up series out of its exile from the 90s. Known as bare knuckle in Japan, this beloved series failed several attempts to bring it into the 3D realm, waiting it out until 2D gaming became fashionable again. But there were many gamers who were impatient and thought this series was just fine as it is in the 2D realm, and many indie devs took matters into their own hands. How? Like for Part 2. In 2003, Senile Team released Beats of Rage, a tribute game that gained massive popularity in ports solely through word of mouth. The small team said ripping the graphics from the arcade game The King of Fighters to populate this fan-made project was easy, but the underlying game engine was written from scratch. Released in 2004 for free with continuous updates, that engine, OpenBore, opened the door to a diverse universe of fan games, like for Part 3. Bomber Games released Streets of Rage Remake in 2011 and continued to develop it for 8 years into the ultimate amalgamation of the original 3 games, with branching paths, customizable play settings, and a shop for unlocking playable characters and perks. F Games took on the challenge to improve on this masterpiece with Streets of Rage 2X, soon to be just Streets of Rage X, with improved effects animation and integration of Streets of Rage 4 playstyles, like for Part 4. Brazil loves superhero beat-em-ups, as shown with Brazil Mugen Team releasing Avengers United Battle Force, packed with Marvel heroes in action. But none can match the one-man fan game juggernaut that is Z Vitor, with Marvel Infinity War giving you more heroes than you can shake a cinematic universe at. Plus, he shows DC some love with Justice League Legacy, letting you play through 4 classic comic storylines and a few game modes specifically for co-op gameplay, like for Part 5. Zvidor must have watched a lot of Saturday morning cartoons as well, since he also made a game based on the 80s Dungeons & Dragons show. This game lets you switch between every member of the party on the fly. BWWD offers another cartoon staple with He-Man. The graphics on this game look like they've been plucked straight from the cartoon, making this perhaps the most unique looking of any open-bore game so far. There's still more, like for Part 6. Nintendo is notorious for shutting down fan games, so grab these while you can. Mushroom Kingdom Fusion lets you play as characters from Super Mario, Mega Man, Legend of Zelda, Castlevania, and even Sonic the Hedgehog. But perhaps the most ambitious game is Donkey Kong Country: The Trilogy, merging all three games into one big adventure. The detail and polish on this game from Andre Productions shows a true passion for this series. It's old school achievement time with SpiffyInfo. What do you get when you cross a classic series of silent shorts about incompetent law enforcement with a programmer who ported Donkey Kong to the 2600? You get Keystone Capers. You have to chase a crook through a department store and catch him before time runs out, or he escapes. The graphics and animation on this game are amazing. Gary Kitchen makes every pixel count. So how did I do? Like for Part 2. Back to old school achievement time. Every object in this department store is determined to slow down my pursuit of justice. But getting 35,000 points gets me that badge. Chasing the crook becomes more complex than just running up floors. If I try to take a shortcut through the elevator too soon, the crook reverses direction and even jumps down a floor, which my cop can't do. The challenge really ramped up, but I got my badge. And hey, it's badge-shaped. Time for more SpiffyInfo. And wow, Gary Kitchen himself commented on my videos about Keystone Capers. So in honor of that, here's another big game in his career. Donkey Kong for the Atari 2600. Gary has a real do-it-yourself streak. He figured out how to program the 2600 on his own, coding his own assembler on an Apple II and building his own interface to the 2600 to run the code for testing, like for Part 2. Time for more SpiffyInfo. Coleco secured the home rights to Donkey Kong and tapped Gary to port it. The game has always been criticized for having only 2 of the 4 levels from the arcade game, but Gary was contracted to fit the game into a 4K cartridge. When he told Coleco he needed 8K for all 4 levels, Coleco said no, they didn't care. They knew they were going to make money no matter what, so they only cared about making the deadline. So yeah, it's not Gary's fault, like for Part 3. Time for more SpiffyInfo. There are a couple of homebrews, Donkey Kong VCS and DK Arcade 2600. They're good and both have all 4 levels, but both of them are 32K in size. No publisher in 1982 was going to shell out for 32K a cartridge, no matter how much of a sure thing it was. Plus, Gary's game is still memorable. The sounds from his game have been used as a stock video game sound effect for countless movies and TV shows.